think it's probably time to dive into how Gyroscope works. I think I've talked to a lot of people, and it seems that Gyroscope is the one thing that a lot of DeFi OGs have talked about. Could you please explain like how does Gyroscope works and how is it different from some of the familiar stablecoins that we know of, for example, DAI or other ones?
Yeah, definitely. I'll start this by framing it as like, so something I said before was that like all of these stable coins are just inherently complicated systems. There's a lot going on, and if you want to ignore a lot of aspects of like how stable coins work, you can make it look a lot simpler than it is necessarily. But that's not the approach we took. We wanted to basically confront all of the risks and all of the just inherent complexity head on, and be able to have mechanisms that like specifically manage for all these different sorts of risks and all these different sorts of complexities that just realistically come up, handle them as opposed to sweeping them under the rug basically and pretending they don't exist. But that also makes it like just inherently more complicated to describe everything about Gyroscope, which is one of the hurdles that of course we've encountered. So I think it's very important, of course, to then just describe in a very simple way how does Gyroscope work. But then there's so many layers that you could like peel back about like actually how does it work on all these different levels, because you need all these different levels to actually manage like the risks that actually come up. So yeah, starting at the very top, like what is Gyroscope in a very simple way? It's basically like a risk management layer for stablecoins. It's packaged as a stablecoin itself, but it's backed by the space of stablecoins and soon potentially more assets than just stablecoins. But the idea is you have this space of assets. They all across the space, they have different risks, and Gyroscope tries to build the thing that you can build on top of the space of risks that manages the risks best, so that you have something that is a stable coin and something that's easy to use because it's just packaged as a stable coin, but it manages these risks kind of like under the hood for you. And I can then step through like how it actually does that. But of course, that's where like starts to get a lot more complicated, because like, well, there's many mechanisms because there's many different risk factors. One other thing that I would just highlight quickly is we also recently launched the yield-bearing SGYD. And this is a kind of a product that is in many ways parallel to like SDAI, but it's based on the GYD system, of course. So the GYD system earns revenue based on like what's happening in the reserve and what sort of yields the reserve assets are earning, as well as kind of like swap fees that accrue to the protocol. And there are some swap fees that accrue to the protocol today through what we call like AMO pools that are also part of the reserve. So pools that are basically composed of reserve assets. And there's also like a means to kind of like turn on a fee switch later that generates like also protocol revenue from its other product lines, from these more efficient liquidity pools that are also performing pretty well as a product class, I would say. And from this like revenue that then accrues to the reserve, by default, that just increases reserve value, increases safety of the system. But the SGYD mechanism that we released a couple weeks ago now provides a means to forward some of that yield onto stakers of GYD. So you can deposit GYD into SGYD and be able to earn some of this yield. And we think of this as basically the best risk-adjusted yield that we think you can get in DeFi, because GYD gives you this like nice kind of balanced exposure to different risks. The yield is also a nice balanced exposure to the different yield sources, and can be quite good at times, we think. What's behind the yield is what the Gyroscope reserve assets are actually earning. So you have a basket of reserves. They're deployed in various ways, and you can see, for instance, on like the GYD page where assets are deployed today, and where they're deployed is earning a yield back to the protocol. as well as like potentially in the future other yield sources from other product lines coming back to be just like by default extra reserve assets. But then because there's extra reserve assets, there's also the ability to forward some of that yield to users.
Where are they deploying that?
And so right now the main reserves are in SDAI, so like earning the DAI savings rate, as well as earning AVE exposure on USDC. These are coming from these sort of like AMO reserves that I was describing that are kind of part of bootstrapping the system and bootstrapping liquidity for GYD. But as scale of GYD is reached, there's kind of like a more diversified reserve that I was laying out before that as scale is reached, the other reserves will be filled out basically. And then you'll reach a point where there's like a kind of a very wide exposure across like all the different risk factors. And this reserve is expected to also like change over time. So that's like kind of an overview of like what does the reserve look like now? How is it expected to change as it scales? And also how is it expected to change in the future?